The GDPR's goals are to enhance individuals' control and rights over their personal information and to simplify the regulations for international business. That's a short snippet out of the Wikipedia article for GDPR. And GDPR is, as we all know by now, this law that forces websites, for various reasons, to have a pop-up showing, hey, we collect your information, do you allow that? As a website developer myself, GDPR is something that I have to know about, because the websites I create need to align with applicable laws, GDPR being one of them. And there's a lot of confusion around GDPR, how it applies to your business, your website, and for website developers like myself are confused about how to actually tackle and comply to this law. So in this video I'm gonna break down two things. Number one being, what should you consider as a website owner? And two, how can you make sure that you are compliant? In its simplest form, GDPR is basically a privacy law. It makes sure that websites like YouTube that you're watching this video on can't collect your information without your prior consent. For example, to make a very concrete example, if I walk into a physical store, they can't know my credit card information unless I insert it in their machine. That is me giving consent by inputting my little security code for my credit card. And the same thing applies for websites. A website can't collect your information like your IP address, your geolocation, your email, your device information without you giving prior consent. And this is great for many reasons, because you can to some extent control where your information exists on the interwebs. And then to take it one step further, you have the right to request the business to delete your information or move it elsewhere if you so request. And what happens if a business doesn't apply with these laws? And if a business doesn't apply with these laws, they will face heavy fines. I forget the number, but let me look it up. Alright, I found the information here, and a business that doesn't comply with GDPR can be fined with up to 10 million euros, or in the worst case scenario, up to 2% of that entire business yearly revenue. So that could be a massive number. And so with that in mind, these are the 5 things that I always keep in mind when I develop websites for my clients as it regards to GDPR. Number 1, cookies. We're all familiar with those banners popping up saying, hey, we use cookies, do you allow us to save our cookies on your device? And there's nothing really inherently bad with cookies. Cookies can be used for anything from remembering your login information so you get a smoother experience when using a product, to saving information about you, your user, your device across different websites. So tracking services like Google Analytics or Google Ads or Facebook ads can know what kind of website you visit, and then based on that they can serve you more relevant ads. And the second example is of course the one that you typically give consent for. Then number 2 is geolocation. This is typically done through an external API to request your current location via GPS, or it can also be done by tracing your IP address to your local data center or your local router and get your location based off of that. But regardless, a website can't do that without your prior consent. And then form submissions. This is pretty obvious. When you submit a contact form, for example, that information that you input in that form needs to be stored somewhere. And this is typically sent to a data center wherever the website is hosted. So can be stored either in US, Europe, Australia, for all I know. This can be all across the world, but the information will be stored somewhere. And then second, newsletters. Newsletters actually, in terms of functionality, is exactly identical to a form submission. So the same thing applies here, that when a newsletter subscriber enters their information, that information needs to be stored somewhere, and that is typically again a data center somewhere across the globe. And lastly, number 5 is data center location. So the location of your data center matters massively, because according to GDPR you are not allowed to transfer data from EU to the US, for example, even if you have the user's prior approval. So if you are a business that operates in both EU and US and other parts of the world, you need to have data centers in each of these regions that store only information related to users in that region. You can't, for example, have EU customer informations in a data center located in the US. That's a no-go. Okay, so those are the 5 things that you should consider. And then to be compliant, there are really 2 main things that you should keep in mind. And the first one is that you should always ask for consent and approval from your website visitors before you do anything with their information. And so this applies to all of the points I've listed before, so newsletters, form submissions, cookies from, for example, Google Analytics, and any type of interaction a user has with your website that saves information about that user. And a lot of the time, depending on what platform you use for your website, that platform can actually do these things without you even knowing. So it's important that you check what your platform of choice does with visitor information. And the most obvious way to ask for consent is, of course, a pop-up banner saying, hey, we use cookies, we collect this and that information. Do you consent to this request? And a user needs to be able to explicitly say yes and no. So a user always needs to be able to use your website even if they click no. It's a privacy, personal rights kind of law. And then the second point is, as I said moments ago, your data center location matters massively. And this is a bit of a tricky one actually, because even if you are a business that only operates in the US, if your website still allows users to connect from across the globe, including the EU, then you still have to comply with GDPR and European laws. The only way that you can ignore GDPR is if you completely block any traffic from outside of the US, for example. So you either block it or you simply have data center in each region. And this is typically very simple. I know most hosting platforms offer data centers in different kinds of regions and have automatic routing between them. I know, for example, Cloudflare can offer a similar solution for this, or GoDaddy can offer a solution for this as well, and most other hosting companies as well. Alright, I know this is a massive subject and there's a lot of things to consider and keep in mind all of the time, and it can feel very confusing. But I hope what I've listed here today have helped you a little bit at least. And if you still feel unsure, just reach out to me directly here in the comments or send a private DM to me over at my website jf.studio, and I'll respond as soon as I can. Alright, thanks for being here. Don't forget to like, subscribe and comment down below. I'll see you in next week's video.